My name is Rachel Morgan, and for years, I believed in fairy tales, at least the kind where love conquers all. I grew up in a quiet Ohio town where life moved slowly and people valued honesty and kindness over wealth or status. My parents weren't rich, but they gave me the kind of upbringing that teaches a girl she deserves respect, love, and security. I was the kind of person who always tried to see the good in people. I wasn't naive, but I trusted easily, perhaps too easily. That's how I ended up falling from Mark. He was different from anyone I had ever met, charming in a way that made you forget your worries, funny in a way that made your cheeks hurt from smiling, and attentive in a way that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. When he proposed, I remember crying so hard my vision blurred. I could barely see him through my tears, but I could feel the warmth of his hands holding mine. And I believed, without hesitation, that he truly loved me. Our wedding was beautiful. Flowers, laughter, toasts, and a ceremony that felt like the opening scene of a movie. My family adored him. I thought his family would too. I thought I was stepping into a life where love and happiness awaited. That illusion began to crumble the moment I met Margaret. She was Mark's mother, polished, poised, and always smiling. But there was something in her eyes that didn't reach me. "So, you're the one Mark has been so taken with," she said, her tone polite but cold. She didn't extend a hand, didn't try to make me feel welcome. It was as if she were already judging, already measuring me, and finding me wanting. Robert, my father-in-law, was quiet, distant, a shadow in the house who seemed to exist more as a symbol of wealth than as a person. And Sophie, Mark's younger sister, barely gave me a glance, her expression a mixture of curiosity and silent judgment. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I was imagining the undercurrents. Maybe that's just how wealthy families acted, formal, reserved, protective of their own. When Mark suggested we move in with his parents for a few months to save money for our own place, I agreed. I thought it would be an opportunity to bond with this family, to prove myself, to show that I could fit in. I didn't argue. I was eager to make a good impression. The first day in the house was tense, to say the least. Margaret insisted on giving me a tour, pointing at every little thing in the house like she was warning me against touching it wrong. "This china set is older than you. Don't even try to wash it," she said, lifting a delicate cup with the tips of her fingers as though it might shatter at a glance. I laughed nervously and nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Morgan," I said, my voice small. Inside, I felt a prick of unease. Sophie hovered nearby, arms crossed, smirking at my every move. "You know Mom likes the napkins folded in triangles, not squares," she said casually. I smiled tightly, forcing myself not to show my irritation. Mark shrugged when I asked why his mother treated me like I was incompetent. "She's just particular. Don't take it personally. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. That phrase became the mantra of my life in that house, repeated every time Margaret criticized me, every time Sophie mocked me, every time Mark refused to defend me. The first week was exhausting. I tried to stay positive, cooking 3 meals a day, cleaning every surface, making sure the house looked perfect. But the polite suggestions quickly turned into lists left on the kitchen counter. Vacuum the living room, iron Robert's shirts, dust the mantel. If I paused for every a second, Margaret's voice would cut through the air. "Rachel, Could you bring some tea? The bathroom upstairs needs cleaning. And Sophie? Sophie made it worse. She lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, offering critiques instead of help. You know, Rachel, you married into this family, not me. You knew what you were signing up for, she said one morning as I carried a full basket of laundry upstairs. I wanted to scream. I wanted Mark to intervene, to say something, to tell them I wasn't their servant. But he never did. He would glance at me, sigh, and mutter, "Don't start drama, Rachel, just let it go." So I let it go, again and again, until letting it go became a heavy weight pressing down on my chest, a constant ache that made me question everything I had believed about love, family, and respect. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was only the beginning. This house, these people, and the man I had trusted would soon push me to the edge, and what I would do next would change everything. The first week in the house passed in the blur of chores, polite smiles, and quiet humiliation. Margaret's helpful guidance slowly evolved into rules I couldn't escape. Every day I woke up before anyone else, preparing breakfast, ironing Mark's shirts, and organizing the kitchen with military precision. By the time Mark left for work, I had already cleaned the entire house, and Sophie was usually still lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. One morning, Margaret stood at the stove, watching me fry eggs. "Rachel," she said, her voice syrupy but sharp, "flip the eggs before they get too brown. You know, just like I showed you." I hesitated, trying to keep my hands steady. "Yes, Mrs. Morgan," I said, flipping the eggs carefully. She tapped her fingers against the counter. "Don't be nervous. You'll get used to it. You have to. We can't have the kitchen ruined, can we?" I forced a smile, but inside I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't guidance. It was control. Sophie didn't even bother hiding her amusement. "Wow, you really want to impress Mom, huh? Or are you just scared you'll screw up and ruin everything?" I wanted to argue, to tell her fear had nothing to do with it, but I swallowed my words. At that point, speaking up only seemed to make things worse. Mark, of course, remained silent. "Relax, Rachel," he said when I complained later. "You'll get used to it. Don't take it so seriously." Not take it seriously. I was living in a gilded cage, treated like an unpaid maid, and my husband told me not to take it seriously? The days bled into weeks. Every meal I cooked was critiqued. Every room I cleaned was judged. And every time I thought I might sit and rest, Margaret had a task for me. "Rachel, the laundry needs folding. Oh, and the guest bathroom could use some attention." Even small mistakes were met with sharp criticism. Once I spilled a little water while filling the sink. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Rachel, you might destroy the marble." She huffed, clearly frustrated that I dared to make a tiny error. I tried to find solace in Mark, but he was distant. He would nod politely while Margaret scolded me, muttering things like, "It's just her style, don't worry about it." But when he said that, it was clear whose side he was on, not mine. Sophie's attacks grew more personal. She'd comment on the way I dressed, the way I laughed, even the way I walked around the house. "You know, Rachel, if you tried harder, maybe Mom wouldn't have to tell you what to do every minute." I felt invisible. The walls of the house closed in on me. I began to question my own worth. Maybe I was failing. Maybe I was incapable. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was strong, capable, and determined, and they were counting on me doubting myself. That realization was the spark that would ignite everything. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I stood in the kitchen scrubbing pots while Margaret and Sophie laughed in the living room. I could hear Mark's muffled laughter at a joke I didn't understand. And I realized something. I couldn't depend on anyone in that house. I was utterly alone. It was in that lonely, quiet moment that I made the first real decision. I would survive this. I would endure, I would observe, and I would wait for the right moment to reclaim my life. Little did I know, the first major humiliation and the beginning of the real game was waiting for me at the next family gathering.
The first big family gathering in Mark's house was nothing short of a nightmare. Margaret called it a small dinner, but I knew better. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, and through the windows I could see perfectly dressed neighbors, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even some of Robert's business associates, all arriving with smiles that felt more like judgments. That morning, Margaret's orders began before the sun even rose. Rachel, peel the potatoes carefully, no bruises. The roast has to be perfect, and the salad, don't forget the dressing, it's too watery last time. Sophie perched herself on a stool, phone in hand, offering commentary. Make sure the roast isn't overcooked, Rachel. Mom is very particular. I felt my chest tighten. I nodded and smiled, my hands trembling as I chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and arranged plates. I wanted to cry, but I didn't dare. By the time the guests arrived, my feet were sore, my hands raw from scrubbing, and my nerves frayed. I had expected to sit with Mark, my husband, and enjoy the evening as his wife. But instead, I was the invisible force keeping everything running. I was the one refilling glasses, serving trays of food, and making sure every crumb and spill was attended to. Margaret, of course, did not lift a finger. She circulated gracefully among the guests, chatting, laughing, complimenting herself on how well everything looked. Sophie flitted around, whispering into ears and smirking in my direction whenever I passed by. None of this would be possible without Rachel, Margaret said, raising her glass. She may not know much about being a wife, but she certainly knows how to work hard in the kitchen. The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. I forced a polite smile, my stomach twisting into knots. Mark didn't look at me, didn't say a word. He seemed more amused by the attention the family showered on me, as if I were a servant, than concerned for my dignity. Later that evening, as I scrubbed dishes in the sink, the sound of their laughter echoing from the living room, I realized I had become invisible. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I wasn't Mark's wife. I was something less, someone they could control, manipulate, and mock without consequence. Sophie, sensing my frustration, approached me with a smug smile. You know, Rachel, if you really wanted to be part of this family, you wouldn't mind doing all this. But I get it. You're not cut out for it. I clenched my fist so tightly my knuckles ached. I wanted to scream, to tell her off, to let the world see my rage, but I knew it would accomplish nothing. I had learned quickly that any outburst would only give them ammunition to treat me worse. That night, I lay in bed, my body exhausted and my spirit bruised. Mark lay beside me, unaware of the storm raging inside me, and for the first time I questioned everything. How could someone you loved and trusted side with people who treated you like you were nothing? How could a family, the very people meant to support and welcome you, turn into masters of control and humiliation? And yet, amid the despair, a small seed of resolve took root. I realized I was strong, even if they refused to see it. I wouldn't let this house crush me. I would endure, observe, and bide my time. Because I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of a game I hadn't yet learned to play. And when I learned, no one would see me coming. After the disastrous dinner, I thought maybe the worst was over. I had survived the first big humiliation, endured Margaret's sharp words, and navigated Sophie's smug observations. But I soon realized that the real battle was just beginning, and Sophie had decided she wanted to win it. It started subtly at first, little comments, barely audible. "Oh, Rachel, did you iron Mark's shirts properly? Not too wrinkled, I hope." Or, "I guess everyone makes mistakes, even someone new like you." She dropped these lines when I entered a room, smirking as if the entire household was in on the joke. At first, I tried to laugh along, to ignore it. I convinced myself she was just teasing. But then the whispers started. Neighbors, people we'd met at community events, even distant relatives. I began hearing bits of Sophie's gossip circulating. "Did you know Rachel can't even cook a proper roast?" Or, "She's so lazy, she doesn't know how to manage a household." I felt my chest tighten whenever someone repeated these things to me. The humiliation was crushing. And every time I confronted Sophie, she wore that smug, unbothered expression, pretending innocence. "Oh, Rachel, don't be so sensitive. I didn't say anything bad. People are just talking. You know how it is." Mark, of course, never stepped in. "Don't pick fights with your sister," he said with a dismissive shrug. "She's harmless." Right, harmless. I tried to tell myself it wasn't personal, but the constant undermining wore me down. Every compliment I tried to give myself, every ounce of pride I'd clung to, was eroded by Sophie's whispers and Margaret's approving nods. I felt isolated in my own home. One evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Sophie leaned against the counter, smirking. "You know, Rachel, Mom says you should be more grateful. We let you live here, feed you, and even let you marry Mark. You should really try harder." I froze, knife in hand, my hands trembling. "Try harder?" I echoed. "Do you think I'm not trying hard enough? I cook, clean, do everything for this house, and you have the audacity to say I'm not enough?" She shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm just telling you what Mom thinks. Don't take it personally." I felt a mixture of rage and disbelief. My own husband, my home, my family, everywhere I turned, there was no support, but only judgment. I began to understand something painful. They weren't just making me work. They were actively trying to break me, to make me feel small, to control me. It was during one particularly quiet night, after everyone had gone to bed, that I realized I couldn't survive like this forever. The humiliation, the whispers, the constant undermining, it had to end. I started thinking, really thinking, about ways to fight back. I didn't know how yet, but a seed of determination had been planted. I would survive this, not just endure it, and one day I would make them regret every cruel word, every sneer, every attempt to belittle me. But the thing I didn't know, though, was that the biggest betrayal wasn't coming from Margaret or Sophie. It was coming from the person I had trusted the most, my husband. It happened slowly at first, like a shadow creeping across a sunny room. Small things I had overlooked suddenly became glaring truths I couldn't ignore. Bills I didn't recognize, whispers of money moving in accounts I didn't know existed, and documents that made my stomach turn. One evening, I found a credit card statement tucked behind a pile of Mark's paperwork. The account wasn't in my name, or at least I thought it wasn't, but the charges were suspicious. Fancy dinners, expensive gifts, trips I had never been invited to, all with my name attached. I confronted Mark, my voice shaking. "Mark, what is this? Why am I on these statements?" I asked, handing him the papers. He glanced at them and waved his hand dismissively. "Rachel, you don't understand. It's just how my parents manage things. They handle the money. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I echoed, my voice rising. "These are my finances. They're in my name. Do you have any idea what this is?" Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're overreacting. My mom knows what she's doing. I trust her judgment. Maybe you should too." I stared at him, disbelief making my chest ache. My husband, the person who was supposed to protect me, defend me, and stand by me, had chosen loyalty to his family over the woman she married. It wasn't just the money. I began noticing other betrayals, small at first, but insidious. Margaret casually asking for information about my friends and work, Sophie reporting back every interaction I had with neighbors, and Mark silently agreeing or nodding along without ever defending me. One day, I overheard Mark on the phone, speaking quietly in the study. My curiosity, or perhaps desperation, got the better of me, and I stepped closer. I couldn't make out every word, but what I heard sent a chill down my spine. He was covering for Margaret, arranging for payments, and even defending her actions to a third party. My heart dropped. All the times I had hoped he might intervene, all the times I had dreamed he would protect me from their cruelty, he had never intended to. He had been complicit from the beginning. That night, lying in bed, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and clarity. The man I had loved, trusted, and envisioned a life with was not the man I thought he was. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult from Margaret or Sophie ever could. I couldn't rely on him. I couldn't hope for him to defend me or acknowledge the injustices I suffered. If I wanted to survive and eventually reclaim my life, I had to do it alone. And so something inside me shifted. No longer would I cry silently in the kitchen while they mocked me. No longer would I wait for Mark to act. If I was going to be free, I would need to be smarter, stronger, and more cunning than any of them. Little did I know, the next shock, the one that would reveal the full extent of their deception, was waiting for me in the form of hidden financial fraud. It was a revelation that would change everything and give me the power I needed to fight back. The moment I discovered the full extent of their deception, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It started innocently enough, checking the mail, sorting through bills, but then I found a thick envelope labeled with my name. Curiosity mixed with unease as I opened it. Inside were credit card statements, bank transfers, and invoices I had never authorized. Purchases I had no recollection of, luxury items, electronics, and vacations were all in my name. But the billing address? Margaret's house. I felt my hands shake as I flipped through the pages. Every signature, every transaction, every record pointed to a terrifying truth. Margaret had been committing financial fraud using my identity. I confronted Mark immediately. My voice trembled, a mix of fear and anger. Mark, these are in my name. What is going on? He looked at me with that same half smile he always wore when he wanted to placate me. Rachel, she's not stealing. She's managing things. You wouldn't understand. I froze. Managing? Managing? My blood ran cold. All the months of humiliation, all the control, the endless chores, the whispers behind my back, it wasn't just about power. It was about money. Margaret had been using me as a cover, and Mark, he had allowed it. I spent the next few days going over every document, every statement, every record in painstaking detail. I realized the fraud wasn't minor, it was massive. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned, all traced back to me. And the cruelest part, they had done it quietly, ensuring I had no access or knowledge, all while continuing to treat me like a servant in my own home. Sophie, of course, found this hilarious. "Rachel, you really should have been paying more attention," she said with a smirk, when I tried to voice my concerns. "Mom's just looking out for the family. You wouldn't understand." I realized something crucial in that moment. I couldn't rely on anyone. Not Mark, not Margaret, not Sophie. They had built a house of lies around me, and I had been trapped inside. But now, For the first time, I had proof. I had something they couldn't manipulate. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Every insult, every chore, every humiliating moment. The financial fraud explained it all. They weren't just cruel because they could be. They were cruel because they were greedy, calculating, and willing to destroy me for their own gain. And that's when I made a decision. I wouldn't just survive. I wouldn't just endure. I would fight. I would find a way to turn everything they had done against them. The first step, I realized, would be documenting everything. Every lie, every transaction, every instruction Margaret and Sophie had ever given me. I started taking notes, saving emails, and even recording conversations whenever I could. It was dangerous, yes, but I knew I couldn't act recklessly. This had to be strategic. Little did I know, the next phase, the confrontation, would test not just my courage, but my ability to manipulate the very people who had tried to destroy me. And it would be the first time I would truly taste the power of turning the tables. Armed with the evidence I had painstakingly gathered, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The house that had once felt like a gilded cage now seemed like a chessboard, and I was finally ready to make my move. I decided to confront Margaret first. I found her in the living room, dusting the shelves with that calm, practiced smile she always wore. "Margaret," I said with my voice steady, "we need to talk. Now." She looked at me, tilting her head, as if trying to figure out if I was joking. "Rachel, what is it? Are you upset about the dinner last week? I can assure you everyone enjoyed it." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "It's not dinner. It's the fraud. The credit card statements, the bank transfers, everything. It's all in my name. Why?" She laughed softly, a sound meant to disarm me. "Rachel, darling, you always were dramatic. Are you sure you're not just tired? You do spend a lot of time running around the house, after all." Sophie appeared behind her, smirking. "See, Rachel, you really should have been paying more attention. Mom's just looking out for the family. You wouldn't understand." I realized something crucial in that moment. They were terrified that I had discovered the truth, and that fear gave me leverage. I turned to Sophie, my voice icy. "You know, Sophie, I have everything documented. Every purchase, every order, every lie you and your mother have ever given me." Sophie's smirk faltered slightly. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would, and I will, if I have to." Margaret's face changed subtly, the first crack in her composed mask. "Rachel, let's not be hasty," she said, trying to regain control. I knew then that I had them exactly where I wanted them. They tried to gaslight me, tried to make me doubt myself, but I had the proof, I had the leverage, I had begun to reclaim the power that had been stolen from me. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced. I realized that this confrontation was just the beginning. They had underestimated me for months, treated me like a servant, humiliated me, and assumed I was weak. But the tables were turning. For the first time, I felt a thrill, not of malice, but of anticipation. I was ready to play the game they had forced me into, on my terms. And when the next move came, it would be devastatingly effective. Little did Margaret, Sophie, or Mark know, I was no longer the powerless wife they had dismissed. I was becoming the strategist.
And that was only the beginning of my plan to take back everything they had tried to steal from me. After the confrontation, I knew I couldn't do everything alone. Margaret and Sophie had underestimated me for months, but I also knew that if I acted recklessly, I could lose everything.
I needed someone I could trust, someone outside their toxic influence, someone who could help me gather more evidence and plan my next move. That's when I remembered Claire, a close friend from college who had moved nearby a few years ago. Claire was smart, resourceful, and fearless, exactly the kind of person I needed in my corner. I hesitated at first, unsure how much to reveal, but I knew I had to trust someone. One afternoon, I invited Claire over under the pretext of catching up. As soon as the door closed behind us, I let the floodgates open. I told her everything. Margaret's controlling behavior, Sophie's mockery, Mark's betrayal, and the shocking financial fraud. Claire listened in silence, her eyes widening at each revelation. "Rachel, this is insane," she said finally. "You've been living in a nightmare, and they've been manipulating you from every angle. You need a plan, and you need it fast." I nodded, relieved that someone believed me. "That's why I need your help. I can't confront them again without support. I need proof, documentation, a strategy to turn the tables." Claire smiled, that mischievous glint in her eyes that I loved. "You know me, I love a challenge. Let's get to work."
This, I said, pointing to the statements and receipts, is the truth. You treated me like a servant, humiliated me, and used my identity for your own gain. And you thought I wouldn't notice. Sophie opened her mouth to interrupt, but I raised my hand. Don't. Let me finish. I explained everything I had discovered, the fraudulent transactions, the hidden accounts, the lies, and their attempts to gaslight me into thinking I was imagining it all. I spoke slowly, deliberately, each word like a hammer striking the walls of their carefully constructed world. Margaret's face paled, and she muttered, "Rachel, we can explain." "No," I interrupted. "There's nothing to explain. You exploited me. You betrayed me. And Mark?" I turned to him, my eyes piercing. "You were supposed to protect me. You chose them over me, over your wife, over the person you promised to stand by." He looked away, ashamed. I could see the guilt, but it was too little, too late. Sophie, usually so smug and untouchable, finally cracked. You can't prove." "Oh, I can. And I will. Every detail is documented, every action recorded. If this goes further, the authorities will see the full extent of your deception." Margaret sank into the armchair defeated. Sophie sat rigid, her usual arrogance replaced with fear. Mark finally spoke, voice barely audible. "Rachel, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize? You were complicit. Every single day you let them treat me like I was nothing. And now you realize the consequences. But realizing isn't enough." For the first time, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I had reclaimed my power. I had turned the tables. I had exposed the truth, and no one could silence me. That night, after they had retreated to their rooms, silent and defeated, I sat in the living room alone. The folder still lay on the table, but I didn't feel fear. I felt victory. The woman who had been humiliated, controlled, and betrayed had finally outsmarted them. And I knew one thing with certainty. My life would never be the same. I had survived the cruelty of my in-laws, the betrayal of my husband, and the manipulation of Sophie. And now, I was free. The days after the confrontation were surreal. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. Margaret and Sophie avoided my gaze, and Mark's attempts at casual conversation felt hollow. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For the first time, I felt like I was no longer trapped in someone else's narrative. I was writing my own. I started taking steps to reclaim my life. First, I contacted the bank and the authorities regarding the financial fraud. It was time to make sure Margaret and Sophie were held accountable for their actions. Watching their panic when the investigations began was satisfying, yes, but more importantly, it was freeing. I no longer carried the burden of humiliation, manipulation, or fear. Next, I focused on my personal growth. I enrolled in courses I had always wanted to take, pursued hobbies I had shelved for the sake of the family's demands, and reconnected with friends I had neglected. Claire continued to support me, offering advice, encouragement, and a shoulder to lean on. I realized the importance of having allies who genuinely cared about me, who believed in my strength, and who celebrated my victories rather than ridiculed me. Mark approached me one evening, his expression somber. "Rachel, I know I failed you," he said quietly. I want to make things right." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Mark, what happened can't be undone. You chose your family over me. You were complicit in their deception. I forgave myself, but forgiving you? That's not mine to give." He nodded, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. "I see that now. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." I shook my head gently. Trust is earned, and some things, once broken, can't be repaired. But I hope you learn from this. I hope you see the consequences of betrayal and inaction. With that, I stepped away from the past. The house, once a prison, became a symbol of my strength. Every room held memories of pain, yes, but also proof of my resilience. Every corner where Margaret or Sophie had tried to belittle me was now a reminder that I had survived and thrived. Months later, I moved into my own space, a place that belonged entirely to me. I decorated it with things I loved, filled it with laughter and light, and surrounded myself with people who truly valued me. I was free, not just from the house or from Margaret and Sophie, but from the fear, doubt, and oppression that had haunted me for so long. Looking back, I realized the ordeal had taught me something invaluable. Strength isn't just surviving cruelty. It's using it to rise above, to reclaim your life, and to show the world that no one has the right to diminish you. I didn't just turn the tables. I rebuilt the game entirely. And in doing so, I discovered the most important truth of all. The power to define your life lies within yourself. And no one, not even family, can ever take that away